you going to speak first, Kim?
I don't know. Maybe. I was just going to tell him that we're going to start a video in a couple of minutes. All right. Video, then Mary Lou. She's just going to round up, getting people down into their seats.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jake. And Tim, you get ready.
That was Mom. Hi. Hello, everyone. If you could settle in, we're going to start a video in a couple minutes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Where's Lamont on the camera? Hi, Chad. Yes. That's right. It's going to start with the video. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Un momento. Just give me the word.
Okay. Tim, you can break down the lights a bit.
What happened to my handy dandy?
Oh, you fit right into the.
Okay, you all set?
Right?
Yep, let's go.
I can claim that I'm from Brooklyn and Queens because I literally am. I live right smack dab on the borderline between Ozone Park and East New York. So this is the Brooklyn side, but this is where all the shopping happened. This was always very vibrant, City Line. There's still a lot of the same stores that I grew up going to that are still around, which is blowing my mind right now. But the reason why it was so special is that it wasn't full of big box stores. A lot of these places were little mom and pop shops, Kenny's. This is where I got my back to school supplies. The Trapper Keeper, the Jansport backpack. Am I dating myself? Lisa Frank folders. Oh my goodness. Wow. Kenny's. You know, I always liked something extra flowery. I mean, back then it was unicorns for me. Colorful unicorns. I don't see anything like that. But you know what? This is still the tried and true. Of course, black and white composition. My mom always said every year you're allowed 3 outfits for the whole school year. And then the rest of the school year was filled in by hand-me-downs from my cousin Audrey. And it got to a point where I was just over it. So I devised a plan in my head. There was a field trip coming up. And I decided to tell my mom that in order for me to go to this field trip, I have to get a new pair of sneakers. The ones that Audrey gave me, they had a hole in them. That wasn't gonna work. So we went to NYC sneaker store. And I ended up with a pair of black and purple high top Filas. I will never forget that feeling that gave me. Finally, some acceptance, feeling kind of fly. That's a special moment for a city kid. We would walk to school. It was about 10 blocks, and I'd be with my siblings and my friends. This is the Queens side of where I grew up, and this is my elementary school. Pia 64, Ozone Park, Queens. This is a very special place, a very interesting place, a place of a lot of transition, and I got to see a lot of it from the time I moved to Ozone Park to the time I was graduating from this little school. It played a big role in making me who I am, truly. I'm going to give you a little bit of our school song. For some reason, I remember all the words. Via Tavo School, Pia 64, the home of the blue and the gold. Ozone Park is a very special place. When we moved to this community, it was starting to change, it was starting to transition. It began as a heavily Italian community, and when we moved to our particular block, we were among the few minorities. So it was tough. It was really tough, but my parents truly believed that this was going to be a positive place for us to grow up. And you know what? No matter the race showing a lot of interest in certain subjects, and she really wanted to nurture that. And that got me really excited about school. Hands down, obviously, my best subject was reading, writing. Worst subject, absolutely math. I was horrible at math. I needed all the help in math. I always sat in the front, but the reason why I did that was because I knew I was going to be raising my hand, and I didn't want to get those looks from the other students who would make fun of me for always raising my hand. But I loved to raise my hand, and I loved to be able to read out loud. I became the orator of my classroom, and I had to sit in front so that the kids weren't looking at me when I was doing it. So pro tip, which I learned very early on, sit all the way in the front so you can block out all the haters. This school, this entire community was truly like a safe haven for us kids. It was a place where all of us could play together. And we were from all walks of life, from all cultures. We had kids from El Salvador, Peru, Guatemala, Puerto Rico. There were still Italians that I grew up with. So Multicultural Day was a big deal for us. They really wanted us to have pride in where we came from. So I remember trying ceviche for the first time, fried rice, lasagna, like all kinds of dishes that I necessarily did not try or have at home. Being from the cultural background that I come from, and also growing up here, it has definitely shaped what I think of food and how much I love food, and how much I love to make it. If you come to my house and you don't know what you're going to get or from which country that food will hail from, that has a lot to do with growing up here and going to the school. So one of the things that I definitely wanted to share was when I started at WABC. Someone reached out to me on Facebook. It was my principal. He wrote a message, said something like, "If you're the same Charlene from PS64, I am so proud of you." That meant the world to me. I mean, not so much the part that I looked the same to him. I don't necessarily think I look the same. But the fact that he was proud of me. That I was able to do something in my life where the people in my community can look at me as a source of pride. So as you enter a new school year, I hope that you were looking at my story, that little girl who was so shy, who no one would ever have believed would become who she is today, doing what she's doing today. I hope that you see that you can totally change your path, no matter what anyone has to say about it.
Well, this is new. Okay, it's been a while. Hello, Indian Hills. Indian Hills High School, Oakland, New Jersey, home of the Braves. Oh, that was my English teacher, Mr. Hartley. He taught me a lot. He was tough, but he taught me a lot. Oh, Mrs. Storms was the best. Oh. Best subject, English. Worst subject, till this day, math. Awful. I'm so glad that they still have teachers on here that I actually learned from. My favorite grade at Indian Hills, I'm gonna say junior year. Freshman year, a little scary, right? Yeah. Sophomore year, hard. I felt like that was my hardest year. Junior year, you're kind of like, all right, this is good. I think I've got the lay of the land here. And then, I mean, of course, senior year was awesome, but I really liked junior year the most. Okay, trophies. Oh, pom-poms. Those look different from the ones that I had. I was a cheerleader for all 4 years. My friend and I were really involved in making up the pom-pom routines. I was very fortunate. My grandmother gave me my first car. It was a 71 Buick Skylark. But it was brown, so we called it the Big Brown Baloney. I fit a lot of people in the car, and we took advantage of that. And I would get a really awesome stereo system, and I had amazing speakers, and we would just crank tunes, pretty much Beastie Boys, and bang the ceiling. It was an interesting time. At the time, the hairdo that I loved was killing the ozone layer, so looking back, I hate it, but you know, the teased hair, the higher the hair, closer to God.
You're an expert when you're a military kid at being the new kid in school every year. I remember counting that we moved easily every 2 years, and some years we moved every year. Virtually every Navy base, Marine Corps base in the East Coast and Northern Europe. You just have to take a deep breath and realize that everybody's feeling something weird. You know, you may be just the only one to be in school for the first day that year, but everybody's feeling something weird. So just give them a smile, walk in, say hi, meet everybody around you. Everything feels much better right after that. I started school in Scotland at about 5 years old, and we had to wear a uniform, shorts and a blazer, even in the winter. And my memory is that I didn't like the lunch meat, and so I used to take the lunch meat and put it inside the jacket pocket on the sandwich because you had to clean your plate. So my mom was always complaining that she would find lunch meat in my pockets everywhere when I was coming back from school. Eventually it led to a sit down and why aren't you eating lunch? But for the first time she was like, why is there lunch meat in every pocket? In high school, so we were lucky enough that we could drive to school. And I remember every morning driving to school and I pick up my friends. It's your first car and I've got my arm on the pickup truck and I'm just driving down the street on my way to Regis High School, only highway. The color was kind of an off-weird color, but it was butterscotch. It had a camper on the back. And we would all go in the back of my truck for ball games and stuff like that. I was always good in biology, natural sciences, but anything that came to math or physics, I was miserable in my group. You'll get through school, everything's going to be fine.
Four years, this was my home. Regis High School on the Upper East Side. Wow. To this day, when I'm at the anchor desk and I announce the beginning of the school year, I still get butterflies in my stomach from my time here. This was a wonderful place, but it was very challenging to come here, and I would always worry about the classes I would end up in. Thank God my meniscus is healed. The lights come on for me. I love it. I had a wonderful time here, friends from all over the tri-state, but it was so stressful and so competitive. I literally started every school day buying a pack of Tums at the corner store down the street. I was born and raised in New Rochelle in Westchester County, so the commute was getting up between 5:30 and 6 every morning, then making my way to the New Rochelle train station, taking the Metro North train, usually the 732 Express. That's what they had back then. And that would get me into Grand Central Station by about 8 o'clock. I would then hop on a 4, 5, or 6 train to the 86th Street station and then walk a few blocks to school. My worst subject ever was math, and that was only once I got to high school. I was great in math and science and grammar school, but just didn't do that well in high school. I managed to pass though. Best subject, languages. We had to take 4 years of Latin when I was here. I think it's optional now. We have to take modern European languages on top of that, and I did great with it. I was on the Hearn speech and debate team for 2 of my 4 years. In fact, Mr. D. McKellar was my Hearn coach. He came up to me in the hallway, right up there, in fact, at the top of these steps, told me that I had to join the Hearn. He didn't give me an option. I ended up the New York State champ because of Mr. D. McKellar, and I know being on the speech and debate team here is what helped me become a good anchor. My favorite grade was, of course, senior year, and I say of course because by that point I felt like I was on top of the pack. It was just a matter of getting through that year and graduating and going on to college. Back in the 80s, the early 80s, I dressed very much like Alex P. Keaton used to dress, which was sweater, button-down shirt, neat slacks, and slip-on shoes. And that's the way I went around. I used to carry a briefcase and look like one of the teachers. There's a funny story that got me the only detention I've ever had in my life. In my senior year, as part of my Christian service project, dressed like Alex P. Keaton with a goatee, looking very mature in my head, I was in our library, and the woman who handled the library was not there for the day, so I was there to help students. I ended up giving a number of freshmen what we call JUG, for Justice Under God, detention. And they would go to detention week after week, various students, until finally our assistant headmaster, Mr. Walsh, asked, who is giving you JUG? And one of the students came to me and said, sir, what's your name? And I gave him the name of a teacher whom I looked like. They told the assistant headmaster figured it out, and I ended up getting detention. The only time in my life I learned. My extracurriculars used to be singing, believe it or not, that was one of them. I would lead the old school in song during masses across I would later minor in opera. Io posso cantare l'opera. Until an opera coach told me I should probably pick a different career. It's unbelievable that it's been decades since I went to the school, yet it feels like yesterday. I was coming down these stairs, hanging out with my friends. The elevator over here, gotta show you the elevator. This is so coveted because we have 6 stories of stairs. We would beg teachers to let us ride the elevator with them all the time. So of course, I was always the one who had the best excuse. I had a bad foot or a bad back, and I would get to ride that elevator all the time. The best part about the start of the school year is you start from scratch with a clean slate. Any mistakes you may have made in the years before or in the previous year, and you get to start off fresh.
Hello, everyone. Hi, good evening. I'm Mary Lou Galvez, the President and General Manager of WABC Channel 7. I am so happy to be here at this historic high school that dates back to the 1920s. I'm told the great fashion designer Anne Klein and actresses Susan Hayward and Rhea Perlman walked these halls. And on Thursday, the school is going to be filled with students for their back to school. Channel 7 is the most watched station in the nation, and we're excited to be partnering with New York City Public Schools for this town hall. I have 2 children, and their safety and education has always been a huge priority for me. And we hope you find this town hall informative as we plan on to cover a wide range of topics. Thank you to Chancellor Banks for being here. I know Thursday is your first day as Chancellor. Good luck to you and the rest of the school year. And we're excited to hear about your vision and the state of our city schools. Thank you as well to our panel, which includes a number of deputy chancellors. And to the Eyewitness News anchor, Ken Rosato, and reporter Sonia Rincon for helping moderate. And to the Eyewitness News team in Channel 7 for putting this together. I see Josh Einiger back there. Finally, thank you to Principals DeCastro, Lambert, and Penn for allowing us to use your auditorium. I'm going to turn things over now to Chancellor Banks. Chancellor?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Oh, don't act like y'all don't realize the school year is getting ready to get started. And you better have some energy to be ready for these kids as they come back. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Chancellor.
Brooklyn is in the house tonight, isn't it?
Yes.
I appreciate each and every one of you who took the time to come out. It's been a damp and dreary and rainy day all day, but you are here. And I, for one, am very, very happy that you all are here. I want to thank ABC and Mary Lou Galvez for even offering up not only this opportunity for us to have a conversation tonight, but for ABC seeking to partner with us in an ongoing basis to continue to tell the stories about what's happening in our schools. I am thrilled to have this partnership, and I can't thank them enough. The video that you just played, I found absolutely amazing, wonderful. Just to hear the stories of these reporters and these anchors at ABC, and to see where their stories began. And tell the truth, didn't you see yourselves in the stories as you saw it as well? Every one of us could probably go back and point to that school where your story began, when we were all funny-looking little kids. And everybody would look back at those pictures and say, "Oh Lord, did I look like that? Did I wear that?" But that's a universal story, and I appreciate it because it tells us that as much as things have changed in the world, there's some things which really remain the same, and that's about the love and the joy that we want every one of our children to experience when they're in our schools. And so I want to thank Ken Rosato and reporter Sonia Rincon, who are going to be the moderators for us today. Let's give them a big round of applause and thank them. Ken, I love the story. You were great. And you know, you hear this from so many people who say, my worst subject in school was what? Math. It's like a universal thing. And so we've got to figure out, in a world that is becoming increasingly based on technology, how we begin to turn that around. And we've got some ideas around how we can do that. I also want to shout out the 3 wonderful principals who lead this educational complex. This school building had some tough times over the years. I remember it in the mid-1980s. But they have turned it around with the leadership of 3 phenomenal women who are leading this work. And I want to thank them. 4 phenomenal women. 5, 6. Can't have enough wonderful women who are leading the work in education. And I just thank you. It's a pleasure to see all of you, and I wish you all the best as you get ready to open up the school year. I'm thrilled to be joined by members of our cabinet, who you all will meet in just a moment. The reason that I get to do the work of chancellor and essentially be the champion for this system is because we have a great team who works side by side with me every day at the New York City Public Schools headquarters, but also because we've got great leaders who are out doing this work across our schools. We've got a number of our superintendents who are here today. If you are the superintendents, please just wave so we can acknowledge you as well. Several of our superintendents from Brooklyn are here. Thank you for your leadership and for your work. And for all the educators, the parents, the students, thank you. Thank you for, first of all, to the parents for entrusting your children to us. We're going to do the absolute best that we possibly can to make sure that we help them to achieve their hopes and their dreams. Just like Ken, and just like Sonia, and just like so many of the others who you saw in the video, who got to be all that they wanted to be, and can point to teachers who helped them along the way, and great educational experiences which paved the way on their journey. And so with that, I just want to say thank you again. I'm looking forward to this conversation this evening.
Certainly. And it's good. Thank you very much for letting us come into one of the school buildings tonight. And it's an honor to meet you, Chancellor. Best of luck to you as you begin this new school year. Well, enrollment across the city is down. Enrollment across parts of Brooklyn, especially central Brooklyn, is decreasing.
Sure.
And with the decreasing enrollment also comes decreasing funding. So the question is, what can be done to turn that around?
Well, you know, I think it is a fiscal reality that we are in fact facing. Over the last 5 years, New York City public school system has lost 120,000 families, students. They've gone in lots of places. Many of them have left New York. It accelerated during the COVID breakout, and in the last 2 years alone, we lost 70,000 students and families. And it has affected our budget, because if you have less students, you're going to have less budget. But we, and I'll have our first deputy talk a little bit about some of the budget implications in just a moment. But I do think it is important to note that if we want to turn it around, we've got to gain the trust of our parents and our families again. And we've got to do a much better job, I think, of not only the work that we're doing, but promoting the good work that actually happens. That's why an evening like tonight is so very, very important. I've traveled all around New York City. I've been in every single borough, and I'm telling you, there are wonderful and amazing stories that are happening in our schools. Places like right here at the Prospect Heights Educational Complex, Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn. I can point all over the city and tell you about amazing stories which are rarely told. And we have to do a better job of telling the stories of the good things, in fact, that are happening, because if we don't, our families will have a tendency to believe that there's only negativity happening in our schools and that good things are not happening. And I'm telling you, I've been all over, and I've been in every borough, and it is amazing work that I see. And that's what this administration is going to be dedicated toward. But as it relates to your question, in terms of some of the budget issues that we have had to deal with, our first Deputy Chancellor, Dan Weisberg, is here with me tonight. I ask that you welcome him, as he'll talk a little bit about some of the implications for budget.
Thank you very much, Chancellor, and good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you in my hometown of Brooklyn, New York. So first of all, as the chancellor said, when you have fewer kids, you're going to have fewer dollars. And that's just, we're doing everything we can to mitigate that, to provide cushion, to provide a bridge for schools and districts that have lost enrollment. It's a real problem. None of us want this. Chancellor doesn't want to reduce anybody's budget. But there is nothing in our budget situation which cannot be remedied by winning back the trust of families across central Brooklyn, across all of our neighborhoods in the city. And so what we have charged primarily each of our superintendents, we have some of our incredible superintendent leaders with us here today. They were selected by the chancellor primarily for a lot of reasons, but primarily because they are experts at engagement, at listening, at having conversations, at talking to people and understanding the aspirations of parents and students all over their districts. And so what we have charged them to do is to win back that trust by listening, by having conversations about what it is that families are looking for, that maybe they're not getting right now, or they're not confident that they're going to get if they entrust the most precious thing to us, which is their children. And so what you should expect starting this school year, but certainly in the coming school years, is new programming, new schools, new after-school programs, new academic programs, new athletic programs that are not what we decide at Tweed is a good idea,
Right.
but what are coming from the grassroots, from what we're hearing from you all, from families, from students, from parents, from caregivers, from grandparents, from community leaders, that is filtering up through the superintendents to us. So it is a real problem. We absolutely feel the pain that school communities are feeling, but it's a problem that absolutely can and will be remedied.
I'd like to follow up on that. Hi, I am a New York City Public Schools graduate as well. I went to LaGuardia High School. I went to Middle School 141 in the Bronx and PS 29 in Brooklyn.
All right. Covering almost all the borough.
So I just want to follow up on some of the budget questions, because when you hear about budget cuts, it's terrifying. Parents are hearing from principals that staff and programs are being cut. Now, these may be programs that are being replaced with other ones, but they're extremely worried about the impact at a time when they'd like to see significantly more money per student to help with pandemic learning loss. Now, we know that the amount of money per student is not going down. It's actually going up a little bit from what it was a couple of years ago. But what do you say to those parents who are worried and angry, and some who are even protesting?
I would say to those parents that the best is yet to come. Things are going to get better. We are in the midst of some difficult times. This pandemic has hit not only our city hard, it's hit our entire nation very hard. And we have to deal with some of the realities of that. But we are really accentuating the positive. I would tell them that there are more dollars that are coming to our schools as well. A lot of times schools get their budgets based upon projections. But once the school year begins and we see that we have more students in our schools, those schools, in fact, will get more budget, which will allow them to be able to put back in place many of the programs that they had wanted to put there in the first place. We have students who have come here now as migrant students, asylum seekers. We have well over 1,000 students that have come now. We are welcoming each and every one of those students. We have room in our schools. And so that is going to be a big help as well. But I think what we are doing with respect to learning loss and accelerating learning for so many of our students, it's one of the reasons why we brought our Deputy Chancellor, Carolyn Quintana, on. This is the space that she's been charged with. She's the Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning, and she has leaned into this in a huge way. And so I'd just like to ask her to help to respond to that question as well. We affectionately refer to her as Q. So Q, would you take that question, please?
I will. Can you hear me? Fantastic. All right, great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's a little bit daunting to be looking out on an audience, but it's really comforting to see so many folks that are familiar faces, and to see so many folks who are from their schools, representing with swag from their schools, really proud to be part of that community. And so really great to see you here, so thanks for being here. I think that one of the ways that we address what's happening in terms of bringing parents back and really thinking about enrollment, engagement, attendance, all those pieces is about what happens in our classrooms. How do we recruit folks back? What are we doing that's really going to give people a reason to come back? And I heard you also ask specifically about learning loss. And one of the things with learning loss is that we want to be really careful that we're not thinking about it in terms of remediation, but instead we're thinking about it in terms of providing just right support in the moment that the child needs it through acceleration. And that requires a lot of pre-planning on the part of schools and teachers, and that will also require support that we're prepared to give. And so a lot of what we're doing to address is that we're building a system of supports through literacy coaches, AIS coordinators who will be living at the district offices. We're piloting through different grant opportunities to have interventionists in schools who can support. And we even have an opportunity to offer high dosage tutoring in our lower grades for literacy and in 6 through 8 for math, so that we can make sure that wherever we have seen gaps, and they are gaps that we anticipated and then we actually saw happen through the NAEP scores that we recently received. So we were ready for this. There are the places where we had already said, this is where we want to address, and we're going to help doing it these ways. And those are all pieces that we want to add to what we're doing, but that's not really where the magic happens. The change will happen when we improve what we're doing in what we call the core. That means where the teacher is and the students are all day. That place where your child spends most of their day, when we make that classroom really strong and we ensure that kids are receiving the type of support that they need based on how they are performing, and that means regular assessments, those screeners that we've put in places in schools, and then interventions based on that in that first tier, and then with that second tier where maybe they need a little bit more in a smaller setting. When we get that right, then we're going to start to see some of those shifts, and we won't need to invest as much in some of those other places that where perhaps we may need to right now. But we're really excited, and I guess I'll wait until other folks have a chance, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment. Really excited about what the Chancellor just mentioned about programs that we're launching and opportunities that we've developed. There's a lot of new, but to the Chancellor's point and to one of his important pillars, the scaling and sustaining what works, there's a lot of revitalization, and there's a lot of just scaling up and out. We have found some fantastic programs and teachers that are doing really wonderful things in our schools, and we want to scale that up and out with teachers working with other teachers and leaders working with other leaders so that we can improve practices across all of our schools. And so those are ways that we'll address some of those gaps that you mentioned.
And Chancellor, if I may, just to hit one more time the budget. Sure. And the budget cuts. You had mentioned that there would be no teachers losing their jobs.
Right.
We have heard, though, parents from some schools saying that there are fewer teachers in those schools. Can you just clarify how that would be the case?
Yeah, so what that means is that there's no teacher in the school system who has lost their job as a teacher. What that means is that if you're in a school which has lost students, therefore the school has lost budget, you may have to leave that school and then go to another school which has seen an increase in students. And so that school got even more budget. They need more teachers. Another school needs less teachers. It doesn't feel good for a school which is losing their English teacher or their art teacher or their music teacher. We get it. But that's to some degree why we don't refer to it as a cut, because not a cut would mean every school is suffering loss. We have over 400 schools which did not lose any of their funding because they didn't lose any students. In fact, some of them saw an increase in their funding because they received more students. So the goal here is we don't want to pit one school versus another. We want everybody to do well, and that's why we've got to have a real campaign around how we get all of our students to come back to school.
It sounds like what you've described is the budget can be kind of fluid, where resources can be shifted throughout the school year should the demand arise in certain schools. A lot of parents have been concerned about class sizes. If class sizes get to a certain point, can resources be added to make sure that they don't exceed a certain number?
Yeah, we always maintain a level of kind of fiscal fluidity, if you will, at the New York City Public Schools offices to ensure that schools will get the kinds of supports that they need. You know, we kind of watch how things unfold during the year, and once the school year begins, and we make adjustments. We make fiscal adjustments to help to support those schools as needed. class size across the city for the last few years has actually dropped pretty significantly. But nonetheless, we're expecting that there's proposed legislation for the governor to sign a bill mandating class sizes at even smaller numbers than they are now. And that may be coming any day now. So we will, and that's not a bad thing for us, right? I mean, we want to make sure that as a chancellor, I don't fight against smaller class sizes. The issue for us has always just been about how do you actually pay for it. Because when you require classes to be smaller, it means you may have to build more classes, you may have to build more schools, and all of those things come with a price tag. So the smaller class sizes, the better for all of our teachers. We just want to make sure that we're working together with the city and the state to find the funds to ensure that we can pay for those smaller class sizes. If we do it together, we can make it happen.
And if we can, because I know time is of the essence here, if we could shift topics just a little bit now. This is the first, can we say, normal school year in 3 years. I put air quotes around that. We still have, of course, the looming issue of the pandemic. We don't know if there are going to be any kind of variants coming this fall. Hopefully not. We have monkeypox. Just when we thought things were fine, monkeypox reared its ugly head. So what's being done to keep students as safe as possible?
Dan, you may want to talk a little bit about that, because we spent a lot of time dealing with issues of COVID. Although I will tell you, we feel like we're in such a better place now, and that this year will really be the year where we turn the corner. We feel like we've begun to turn the corner already. I don't think that monkeypox is, all of the research and the science that is demonstrated to us is not showing that that's a major issue for us in our schools. But COVID is ever present. But yet the safest place for all of our kids really is in schools. And Dan, we've been dealing with this since I became chancellor. Why don't you share a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Ken. And it seems like a long, long time ago, some of us even longer, in January when students returned to schools after the holiday break, at the height of the Omicron surge. And that's what the chancellor and the mayor faced as they came into office, and committed to keep the schools open. And you know, we may forget some of this, but there were a lot of people saying, no, we should close the schools, we should give it a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, the numbers are high. And what the mayor and chancellor said at that time is, we're going to keep our doors open, we're going to keep our students and our staff safe, because whoever comes to school needs to be there. They may need a warm place to be, they may need a meal, they may need a hug from their teacher, etc. And so that was, those were difficult, stressful times, Ken, but we learned a lot. And throughout that surge and then the subsequent ups and downs of COVID, what we saw consistently was so gratifying, which is, as the chancellor says, regardless of what was going on in the community, COVID up, COVID down, COVID flat, the schools were much safer than the community. The schools were the safest place because of the measures that the mayor and the chancellor put in place, like home testing. So we are going to continue. Our home testing program is just an example of the measure. We think it's really, really important. Every child, every student, every staff member will be getting 4 home test kits a month. And then if there is an exposure, if there's a case, and we will continue our situation room, so there's a place for parents and students to call in and staff members to let people know there is a positive case, I tested positive. We'll provide additional test kits for students in that classroom. But what we won't do, because of the data, because of the research, because of what we hear from the experts, is shut that classroom or that school down, close the doors to the students and the community so nobody can get in. So we feel very confident about our COVID protocols. We'll continue to work on ventilation. We'll continue to work on air purifiers and so forth. We'll continue to look at the data with our friends from DOHMH. And then monkeypox, as the chancellor says, that is something we are watching very carefully and studying carefully. At this point, all the research and all the experts are saying they do not expect it to be a risk in schools. Having said that, we are providing resources to our educators, to our leaders, to make sure they can spot and they can provide good information to our parents and kids to look out for the signs of monkeypox.
But masks are fully optional this year.
Masks are fully optional. We're feeling really good about that. And it's because of all the protocols that we put in place that have put schools in such a safe place that we're in a position now where we believe that, you know, students shouldn't have to wear masks. It is optional. They can do that if they want. And the same thing for our staff. Our staff, we require them to still be vaccinated. We think that is what has gone a long way toward ensuring the safety of our schools. But our students will not have to wear masks. And I know there are lots of students who are very happy to hear that.
I'm going to take a question from an audience member. This is from Erica, who is a parent. Says, Chancellor, the community was very excited by your initiative to expand gifted and talented across the city because it feels like you recognize that some communities have a greater need for those programs. But then parents immediately said, okay, now do special ed. How will you work to expand access to special ed?
Well, first of all, what we did with the gifted and talented was really a response to listening to parents and families across the city. And you should know that this is a large city. We have almost 1 million families. Every family and every community doesn't feel the same as other families. So my job as chancellor is to listen to everybody and to do the best that I can to try to provide the policies that will work for everyone. Gifted and talented is a really big deal. We're really excited about it, and I think we've gotten it right. There were a limited number of gifted and talented programs before. We expanded on those programs. Prior administration wanted to get rid of gifted and talented, but what the families were telling us and the communities, don't get rid of it, expand it. And that's exactly what we did, and we're looking to see what those results look like this year, and we're prepared to expand it even more. But as it relates to special education, again, our Deputy Chancellor talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing on that. Quintana.
Great. Thank you for that question. And we're really excited, actually, that we are able to expand beyond the 5 citywide programs to make sure that we have entry in both kindergarten and in 3rd grade across every district. And where we saw the need for additional sections, that there's the opportunity to open additional sections as we go. And so we want to make sure that we're creating programs that are worth having open, that are really going to challenge our students intellectually, socially, and so we're making sure that we're putting together criteria that didn't exist before for leaders and for teachers, and they've already begun putting together an entire series of training for teachers so that teachers will receive support throughout, ensuring that students are engaged in hands-on experiential learning, and that has an impact on a school as a whole. Our hope, and if we experience success with this G&T rollout, what happens is we'll see an improvement across our schools in general. And we've seen that in schools where there's some really strong G&T programs. All of the other classes got better as a result as well. We are really pushing toward an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning, where kids are taught to read and research and write based on their curiosities, where they can learn things like math, which all said were a problem, right? By understanding and having conversations about it and really pulling things apart and inventing what something might mean to them to really make sense of it. And so opportunities for kids to be engaged like that, and that's what's going to happen in our G&T sections, and we hope also has an impact across our schools. We're opening the training to schools in general so that we can do that. The other piece that's really important for us is the parent engagement component. This year, the way to get into G&T was different than years prior. And it was an important step for us because we wanted to make sure that we were letting kids into kindergarten in a way that was respectful of who they are, how they learn, and how they're going to develop. We want to engage parents in the process to make sure that we're using the right assessments and that they're more broad and more dynamic. We also want to engage parents to talk about the model and hear along the way, how's it going? What can we do differently, and what do you want to see for next year? We're including components that we've heard from many folks in terms of how we create enrichment across our classrooms. And so we're really, really excited about what G&T can bring, and hope that that's another one of those ways that we say, you asked for it, we're going to build it, we're taking our time to make sure that it's right, and we want you to come back and experience it.
But and as it relates to special education, which I think was the crux of the question as well, is that we've had a lot of issues and challenges in special education. There's a lot of work that has to be done. There are wonderful and amazing programs that we have. We just have to expand on them so that parents and families have greater access to the kinds of supports that students with varying levels of abilities will be able to access. That is something that I accept personally as chancellor, and I'm committed to providing the supports within our system that will meet the needs of all of our families. But we've got our work cut out for us for sure.
Along the lines of that, if I may, before we go to the next question, in a district like this where you have over 100 languages, correct?
Yes.
How do you deal with special education in multiple languages?
There's the challenge. I mean, but this is New York, and so we've got a host of our teachers who are bilingual. We continue to recruit the best and the brightest that we can find with who speak a host of languages. You know, the whole world lives here, right? And so I'll give you an example right now. We are right now engaged with conversation with the island of the Dominican Republic, and meeting with the president and the consul general and others to try and bring more bilingual teachers here from the DR who will also help us in this space around needing more teachers who can speak the languages of so many of the students who are here. That's been a shortage area for us for a long time, even in the general education practice, much less special education. But that's an idea that came to us from a group of teachers from around the city. There's a group of Dominican teachers called Adasa, and they brought that idea to us, and it's something that we have moved on, and in the coming days and weeks, we certainly hope to get a cadre of Dominican teachers who are going to be here to try to help us dealing with some of these issues. It's just an example of the level of innovation and out-of-the-box thinking that we have to bring to the table if we really want to come up with real solutions.
If I may add too, we are expanding our bilingual programs, and those bilingual programs are bilingual programs and special education programs. We have a range of different opportunities. 86 new sites have been identified to build actually new bilingual education programs, and we're expanding in those places where they already exist. And some of them may have dual language and transitional bilingual education programs in the school already, and so we have some sites where they have multiple programs, and we want to build those up and out to ensure that we include more grades, and that if we need to, we include more sections. So there is genuinely a push to create more of what's working. Same with some of our programs that are for specialized instruction, so we're expanding our sensory engagement exploratory program that did really well in a small number of schools. We're going from 10 to 70, and we're even piloting in 3 high schools, so we're really excited about opportunities to do things like that, to expand programs like the ASD Nest program for students who are on the spectrum that have been really successful, that are leading toward our bigger vision of creating a more inclusive system where our kids can go to their local community school and get the services they need and be among their peers.
I'm going to take a question here from a teacher who says what he loves most about his school is the diversity. But the question for the Chancellor is, what plans do you have to accelerate the success of our children?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm going to let our Deputy Chancellor for Leadership answer that one. That's why I got you guys up here. This is Dr. Desmond Blackburn, and so he is the Deputy Chancellor for Leadership, and by extension, the development of culture and the support in our schools. Dr. Blackburn?
Thank you so much for that question. And so the core here is around, as the Chancellor would say, reimagining the school experience for our youngsters. And we know that that reimagined school experience cannot happen if the educators, the teachers, and all the adults feel handcuffed, if you will, around innovation and applying creativity, right? And so starting with the superintendents, we are trying to foster this culture of more support, more coaching, more development, more collaboration across districts citywide, hoping that that attitude and that mindset filters down to principals being more collaborative, more coaching, more supportive, so that teachers in the ecosystem of that school feel empowered and feel the agency in order to collaborate, create, and really recreate that schooling environment that we talked about. And doing that in a very, very strategic, intentional way, and holding ourselves accountable for all of it.
We have a school staffer, we won't mention a name, but what is your why, and how do you continue to hone in on it and foster it? Philosophical question.
I think each one of us would have a great response to that. And my why is because I love all of our children. I love this city. And this is a city which developed me, nurtured me, supported me, much like it did those who we saw in the video as well. I'm a proud product of Philip and Janice Banks. You know, my father was a New York City police officer right here in Brooklyn, the 73rd Precinct. I grew up on Montgomery Street between Notion and Rogers, just a few short blocks from here. This is where much of my family still lives. I love New York, and I'm ever thankful. My mom and dad raised 3 boys. I'm the oldest of 3. And then we all went on to do good things and to continue to give back to this city. And when I look into the eyes of young people, and I just see the hope, the joy, that moves me deeply. And I want for every young person what I got. And it breaks my heart when I hear young people not getting the kinds of supports that they need. And that's not always just about a budget or dollars. That's about love and a commitment from adults to young people that I love you unconditionally and there's nothing that you can do about it. Every one of these teachers that I heard each one of them point out the name of a teacher who made a huge difference in their lives. My 3rd grade teacher, my 5th grade, my 8th grade teacher. Anybody who goes on to be a success in anything that they do in life can point to at least one teacher who said something to them, who poured a word into their spirit that lifted them and made them believe that they could do things that they may not have even thought that they could do up until that time in their lives. That's what it means to be a teacher. It's very different than being an instructor who just teaches a subject. Teachers love their children. And I believe in teachers. I believe in their ability to transform young people. And when they do that, you can transform your neighborhood. You can transform this city. You can transform this world. And I don't mean it from a touchy-feely, it's a good story. I mean it from the perspective that this nation, if it is to be able to be all that we want it to be, we have to lift up all young people. We can't leave any of them sitting on the sideline. Everybody has to be in the game. So that's what I believe deeply. And this is the kind of administration that we're trying to lead. That's my why.
Good answer.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to a question now. You mentioned your family background in public safety, school safety and security. A lot of the safety issues that we see happening in schools originate outside of schools. What are you doing this year to help protect kids, to help curb the recent spike in gun violence affecting the youngest members of the community in their schools?
Well, I want to turn to Mark Rampersant, who heads the Office of School Safety for us, and I want to just say to everybody, I think he's one of the most talented executives that we have in our school system. Well, I didn't know him before I became chair. I knew him a little bit, but since I've gotten to know him, we are in great hands with Mark Rampersant as he leads this work around school safety. He lives it every day. It's deeply personal to him, and I'm just thankful that he's here. He has the background, the experience, and he will tell you about some of the things we've been working on to ensure that our students continue to be safe. Because we hear a lot of negative stories about safety, but you don't really hear about them in our schools. There are a lot of things happening in our neighborhoods. But Mark Rampersant, would you take it from here?
Absolutely, and thank you, Chancellor. And thank you all for clapping when he said that, but let's move forward. So I can tell you by starting out with my why, if that's okay. And my why is for every young person who has to stand at the back door where the lunch lady is, and when she opens the back door and gives them food to go home with to feed family. My why is getting to school earlier than most kids so that you get an opportunity to wash up because you came from a homeless shelter. My why is being able to talk to a teacher about the very things that happened to you the night before by the very people who are responsible for keeping you safe. So for me, this work is not only the utmost important, but for me and this administration, it is in the forefront of everything that we do. When you ask about the safety of our young people, I say to you this: it is not only the responsibility of the Department of Education to keep our young people safe, it is all of our collective responsibilities to do this very work. And we keep the doors open and we invite each and every one of you, parents, siblings, grandparents, and others, to help us. And as we put our shoulder to the wheel to ensure safety for every one of our young people that walk over the thresholds of our schools. The fact of the matter is, young people feel safe in schools. And they feel safe because we have the most amazing educators in the system. Starting from our school safety agents who greet our young people at the door, to our custodians who keep our buildings clean, our lunch people who keep our kids fed, our paraprofessionals who keep our young people guided, our school aides who walk throughout the building and do all kinds of work as directed by our principals who are amazing rock stars, our APs, and I'm sure you get the message. Each and every one of us pull together and pull our collective responsibilities to ensure young people are safe in our schools. The question is, how do we keep them safe when they walk outside the communities? Well, we continue to invest in our communities, and we enlist the support of our merchants, our houses of worship, private businesses, most of all our residents, to keep our young people safe. Under this administration, we have a chancellor who put his money where his mouth is. And we said that the community has been doing this work free of charge. And for the first time, we are enlisting the community to help us keep the community safe. And when we announce that, I think in a day or so, I am hoping the entire New York City gets excited about the work that we're doing to ensure that our young people are not only safe in our schools, but they are safe as they transition to and from school on a daily basis. Our young people are confident in the fact that there is a nurturing adult in the building who they can talk to. And when they see something, they say something. We want to make sure that that continues on when they leave the school building, when they're outside on the weekends, and when they're out on school breaks. We want to make sure that they return the very way that they left us. So that's our why. That's why we do the work that we do, and we remain committed to safety in our schools.
How about attendance and grading? We understand there have been some changes this year. Can we talk about that?
Yep, Deputy Chancellor Quintana, you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I'll try to tackle as best I can. So not really any changes to attendance. We're, I think, taking attendance in ways that we have in years past. What we do want to make sure, though, is in terms of grading, schools have their own grading policies. What we have introduced is a New York City, the Department of, whatever the Department of Technology stands for, DIIT, put together a really great resource that is a grade and messaging system that schools will have access to so that all grades and messages are accessible through the system. In addition to that, we're helping schools to think about grading in a very different way. While we're pushing to move toward inquiry-based teaching and learning, we also want schools to think about competency grading and really think about what it means to measure a student's progress toward attaining a standard. That means measuring how well they're doing along the way to get to whatever your goal was. And that goal has to have been made explicit to the kids well in advance so they know what they're working towards. And so really working with schools to think about how do you put that into grades when you're grading both on-demand tasks, so the things that they're doing right away in front of you, and those longer-term assessments that happen throughout the unit. Particularly if you're working on something that might be a project or something that is longer research or it includes discussion, right? Really thinking about the different ways that we measure what kids know and then are able to determine how they're making progress. And the other pieces that go into that aren't part of grading, but are part of just keeping track of how kids are progressing in terms of like literacy levels and math levels with the screeners that we're using and we're tracking as well. But in terms of the grading system, we're asking schools to make sure that they have their grading policies, that they have committees that have been put together to really think about making sure those policies are fair and equitable. And there's an entire set of folks at our central offices who can help support that because we want to make sure that people are paying attention to how we help kids generate those grades, and that they're not just for the purposes of grades, but really to show, are kids making progress, and if they're not, what do we need to do differently?
Take another question here from an audience member. Don't know if this is a parent, a student, teacher, not sure, but he says, arts education is so important to me. What are you doing to support the arts? I know there's an art school in this building.
Well, there are a number of things that I will say to you on the arts in particular, but before I do, I will tell you that I hear from parents all across the city about the need for more arts, music, dance, spoken word. When we talk about coming out of COVID, there's no answer in a bottle to how to respond to this COVID pandemic. But the arts really do speak to lift the spirit and to lift the soul. But more importantly, it's hearing from our families and our communities, which is at the heart of really of everything that we're doing our best to try and address. And I wanted to ask our Deputy Chancellor, Kenita Lloyd, she's the Deputy Chancellor for Family and Community Engagement, and connecting it, in fact, to the arts, but the larger issue around the engagement of families. It sits at the core of everything that we're talking about. When you recognize that you've lost 120,000 families, families are voting with their feet. They're sending a very strong, clear message to us that if you don't do things differently, you will continue to have budget cuts, if you will, because the families are leaving. If the families leave, we lose dollars as well. We've got to re-engineer, we need a new marketing campaign around how we engage our families. And the arts and music and all those things play into that. But Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, you want to just talk about this because it's one of our major pillars.
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you for all the families that are here tonight and those who are tuning in online. We know that you are getting your student ready for school this week. Parent involvement is the utmost priority for this administration. We know the research. We know that parent engagement is key to increasing student outcomes in our schools. And we want to hear from you. We know that your involvement in our schools and our school community and in the work that we do is critically important to our success. And that's why we are so committed to hearing from each and every one of you. The Family and Community Engagement team ensures that parents around the city have an entry point into our education system so that we can help to demystify how you create success for your student.
Can I just, I'm sorry, on that, if we can, if you can speak directly to a parent right now who is not currently involved, who does not come to meetings, et cetera, what would you say to that parent to try to get them to be more involved?
I would tell you that your student is watching you. They're watching your involvement in their school community, and they're looking to you to see how engaged you are in their performance, in their success, and in their lives. I would encourage you to attend parent-teacher conferences, get to know your teacher, your school community, your school leaders. I encourage each and every one of you to register for your New York City Schools account so that we can be in touch with you directly. And I also encourage you to seek out your local district community education council. These are the parent leaders who have been elected by your community, who raise and elevate your voices, your concerns, and share your feedback. That's what I would say to parents who are not engaged.
And I hope you're okay, we're just checking on. I would also say to parents that for your child, that the key to helping ensure that they can fulfill the promise of all that they want to be really begins in school. This is where you get to work it out. This is where the answers will be. This is being in school and being engaged with your teachers and being with the other students in school are where you really are on that journey from childhood to adulthood. But parents have been saying to us, school needs to be different because their children tell them, far too many of them, that school is boring. They don't feel engaged. But when you have a child who tells you how much they love school, you will get all the parent involvement that you want. So that's why I'm saying we have to change the experience that our kids are having. We do that, we will ensure that our parents will be there with us as well.
I think just add one more thing. Oh, sorry, Dr. B. Ken, one more thing. I say this in part, not just as first deputy chancellor, but as a New York City public school parent twice over. If you can't make it to parent-teacher conference, if you're exhausted and you can't make it to the curriculum meeting or what have you, please contact your principal, contact your superintendent in whatever way you want, email, dweisberg@schools.nyc.gov, I'm serious about that, and figure out how the school can come to you. One of the things we have to reimagine, the chancellor talks about this a lot, is how we make sure schools are welcoming places. Parents are working 2 jobs sometimes. Parents have multiple kids. I'm one of 5 kids myself. My parents were exhausted. They were doing all those things. We can't just expect that parents are going to engage on our schedule, on our terms. But we need to hear from you to tell us, what can we do? Can we set up Saturday meetings? Can we do more by text? Can we do more by Zoom? Whatever is going to work for you, please hold us accountable for that, because we realize as much as we're asking you and we're exhorting you to please get involved, we have to do things differently to make it easier for you as well.
Absolutely.
We have another question from a community member, and this sort of goes back to dealing with or quantifying some of the data on learning loss. How have the recently released NAEP scores affected your approach to the coming school year?
Thank you for that question. And as I'd mentioned earlier, Sonia, one of the things that we were looking at was data trends across, and something that isn't surprising or new to us, or not that it wasn't surprising, rather, something that isn't new is that students have been struggling in terms of literacy and math, and that happened even before the pandemic. And so when we saw these scores, we had anticipated needing to provide adequate supports and different kinds of supports in literacy and math. And so those are places where we are already putting in place different types of programming that hasn't existed yet. So you heard earlier the Chancellor say, and you heard First Deputy Chancellor Weisberg also say that we're actually building new things, right? And so we have 2 dyslexia landmark programs that we are opening, one in District 7 and one in District 5 for students who have very specific needs in terms of print-based disabilities, so that we can provide that real kind of targeted support with that explicit instruction. And the beauty of this, and the beauty of any of the programs that we have, is that we're actually taking the time to train additional teachers through this, so that when we open the next one and the next one and the next one across all of our boroughs, that we already have folks who are ready to do this kind of work. Because if we aren't training people up, then we just have those pockets of greatness.
Right.
And what we need to make sure is that we have that consistency of services in every community. And so that's part of what we're doing. We're also making sure that we're really helping teachers learn how to use that screener data. You have information about your students in terms of their literacy and math levels. That's a hard word to say, literacy. Literacy and math levels 3 times a year. And so we want to make sure that teachers know how to use that information, and that schools have put together data teams that are helping them to think about, okay, now you have this information, you're not just labeling or placing kids, but you're thinking about, how do I shift what I have been doing or offering to meet the needs of the kids? For some folks, that may already be something that they're doing really well. For others, it's not. And so that's where our teams of coaches and AIS coordinators that are part of the district, and our interventionists and the other folks that we want to make sure are there, will support schools in doing that, so they can do it adequately and they can really meet the needs of all of our kids. And so these opportunities, curriculum is a really big part of that. If you didn't already have a core curriculum in place that was approved by our central offices, schools that were in grades K through 2 were asked to go back and make sure that they acquired those. And so making sure that you've been trained along the lines of that very specific, approved, vetted curriculum that is grounded in research and is grounded in evidence, that's another really big part of it.
Let me say this also. I'm going to really cut to the chase with this, right? A lot of folks were outraged at the NAEP scores. And just think about it. All it took was 2 years to wipe out all of the gains that we had had. Now, what does that tell you about just how fundamentally strong is our foundation? It's not been a strong foundation. At the core of the instructional and academic issues that we have dealt with is the fact that over the last 25 years, we changed how we were teaching reading to our students at the earliest grades. And the research, the results are in, and it has not worked. It has not worked broadly across this nation, and it has not worked particularly for children of color. And, you know, when I grew up, and I'm sure, you know, many of you, we learned through a phonetic approach to the teaching of reading. Well, about 25 years ago, that began to change, and we went to something called balanced literacy. And balanced literacy has not worked. And so we are going back to a very different fundamental approach to ensuring, if I don't do anything else as chancellor, this is the number one thing that I must establish, is that by the time our children are in the 3rd grade, every child learns to read. That there should be no excuses around that. We have a $38 billion budget. We have a $38 billion budget. That is more than enough money to ensure that every child learns to read. Now, after that, there are lots of other things that we want to be able to do with our children, and creating all kinds of career pathways and wonderful opportunities for them as they get older. But this system ought to ensure that. No excuses. We will make sure that your child learns to read. We have not been doing that. That's real talk. And I want to ensure that as this chancellor and this administration, that we ensure that every child is going to learn to read. Because once you learn to read, then you can read to learn, and you can do all kinds of other wonderful and amazing things. But those are opportunities that will not present themselves if you are in the 7th, the 8th, and the 11th grade, and you are not a strong, fluid reader. Literacy must be at the core of everything that we do, and it will in this administration.
Now, there are superintendents in our crowd. I got to meet some, and it was a pleasure, and some principals. We have teachers here. We have our leaders here up on our stage, on our dais. The question is, in terms of checks and balances, how are superintendents held accountable for parents and the teachers and the principals, and in turn, how do they hold you accountable?
Dr. Blackburn?
So that's always a great question. I think, first of all, how many of you all in the audience tonight are teachers? I know we have principals, school staff. How many of you in the audience? So those hands that are up, you can put them down now. They will tell you that over the last 25 to 30 years in education, we have prioritized this notion of holding people accountable. What we have not prioritized is those people that we profess to hold accountable. We haven't prioritized the development, the training, the coaching, the resourcing of those people, right? So it doesn't take much to say, if you don't, then we will. It takes more for us to say, if you don't, it's because we haven't positioned you well enough to do. And so the accountability is really on us, I think, in this administration to do that.
We have another question from a community member who says, how do I know my kid is learning?
I'm sorry if you're getting sick of hearing my voice. How do you know if your kid is learning? Well, so one easy thing, we were talking about parent engagement and parent participation. It doesn't always have to look like coming to the school, right? When kids come home, ask them what they learned that was really different this week.
Right.
Ask them if something made them laugh that they didn't know before. Ask them if they got to help somebody learn something.
And before you go further, and you've got to press them for real answers. You can't just say, how was your day?
No.
Good.
Don't ask how was your day, because you'll get fined. You have to ask questions like that. Did you read something silly today? Right? Like, ask them specific questions about those pieces. Ask them to teach you. My mother didn't speak as well as I did and couldn't read the things that I could. And at some point, she couldn't help me anymore. But she asked me every day, teach me something you learned today. And in doing that, you're able to help them, one, commit that to memory and really process it and make sure that they are actually learning it. And then two, you get to find out, what are they learning? We want to make sure that, yes, grades and test scores and all of those things are important, but the best way to know if your child is making progress is, are they happy at school? Are they talking about their books and reading? If they're in the older grades, are they talking about the research that they're working on? And when you're really diving into what makes a kid tick, when you're letting them pick topics that are according to what they're interested in, that are relevant, where they're going to get to learn about the workforce, where they feel loved by someone and so they want to work for them, they'll tell you about it. And so that's how we want to know that kids are learning.
And if I may, Chancellor, you talked about wanting to make sure students have a strong foundation and being able to learn how to read. And you can't move forward comfortably and enhance or increase and grow in your education unless you have that foundation. You have to have that literacy. However, there are 1,000 things that could be challenging somebody and their ability to read.
That's right.
Dyslexia, one of them. Challenges at home, we heard about. So we talk about we need to do more to make sure that when those children go home, et cetera, they don't have challenges that may cause some challenges, of course, for them to learn how to read. The question is specifically with dyslexia. Is there a means, a test, a way of finding out that students may suffer from that so that we can teach them to read in spite of and because or around their challenge with
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big things that we're dealing with now, these dyslexia screeners that we're getting ready to roll out. And again, the Deputy Chancellor can talk a little bit more about it. But, you know, the mayor who suffered from dyslexia has put this as a mandate for us. So the reading and the literacy is critically important, but then we have a subset of students who really do have greater challenges than others. And being able to screen for that is critically important, and then being able to provide the interventions for that as the second part of it. And those are all pieces that we are dealing with and developing now. We're rolling out, you know, there are going to be 2 programs, as the Deputy Chancellor mentioned, one in the Bronx and one in Harlem, that are going to be focused as real laboratories where we're going to have a chance to really go deep, and they'll say it'll really serve as a beacon and a blueprint for the rest of the system around how to address this issue. But prior to now, it hasn't even been put on the front burner, if you will. We're putting it on the front burner. We're delving deeply into this. We've been talking to some of the best schools in the country who've been dealing with this for years. We've been meeting with them. We have a whole literacy council. And what else have I missed, Deputy Chancellor?
We have a couple of pilots that are happening, and so real important, I think, for us is that one of the things that, you know, you heard Deputy Chancellor Blackburn talk about, really important to develop our superintendents, for them to develop their leaders, to then develop the teachers, right? So we always joke on our team that we're the grown-ups that work with the grown-ups that work with the grown-ups that work with the kids. And so part of that working together is making sure that we're developing what we call a multi-tiered system of supports. And we talked about that first layer, right? That tier 1, where everything happens, making sure that's really strong. And when a child is struggling there, or when that assessment that we talked about, that screener, shows that a child may be struggling, we're going to try some interventions, and we want to make sure that the right dosage, so it has to be the right number of minutes. You can't just say, well, I did 15 minutes today and we're good. It has to be the right dosage, and it has to be in the right group size. And if you've tried that, and this child is still not making progress after the next set of assessments, then we have what we call a secondary screener. And that secondary screener will be administered for the kids that are showing that they're not making adequate progress, for whom we may not know what they need, right? And so with that secondary screener, we'll find out if they have some sort of a print-based disability that could be addressed through one of these programs that we've talked about. We'll find out if the child can continue to make progress, and if not, they may need to be referred for an evaluation, for services, right? And we want to be careful that when we're talking about MTSS, that we're not saying that MTSS means we don't have IEPs, or that students don't have other types of disabilities that need to be addressed with really specific services. But it helps us to identify that from the get-go and perhaps reduce the number, well, not perhaps, that is the goal, is to reduce the number of referrals and give kids what they need in those moments. And so that secondary screener helps us do that. So we have some pilots where we're working with an organization called Promise Project out of Columbia Medical. They'll provide secondary screeners, and they also do mini evaluations for our children who need it. We also have a pilot with 160 schools, and so we're going to select schools that will actually have 40 interventionists in their schools.
Right.
So that those schools will actually receive that on-site support, that shoulder-to-shoulder work to figure out what needs to happen for our children. And we're selecting all of those schools based on data and based on superintendent interest so that we can make sure that we're putting in place the right kinds of programs to meet the needs of our kids. And if we lift the kids that are struggling now, then we improve the system as a whole, and we increase the number of kids that are in those advanced programs and those wonderful programs that we're building across the board.
That's right. And just because Kanita, we're invoking the village as well. You know, we've got elected officials who've been fully engaged in this process with us as well. We got Assembly Member Bobby Carroll, who's right here in Brooklyn, who's been talking about this issue, and he was a student who suffered from dyslexia, who's been engaged with us.
I wanted to ask about some students with some major needs, and those are some of the homeless students from homeless families who are staying in shelters, including some of the more recently arrived asylum seekers. Many of them are living in shelters now. In recent years, I believe the figure is 43% were chronically absent. What are some of the things that can be done in the schools to help stabilize that?
I don't know, Mark, Kanita, anybody want to speak to that?
Sure. One of the things, and I know the professionals in the audience are very, very good at this, but we're going to ask everyone to even heighten their awareness, and that is to make sure every child is fully seen. And to make sure every child is fully seen, that also means we have to acknowledge when we don't see little Johnny or little Julia in school, and ask all the necessary questions, make the phone calls, make the visits. We have to rally around, because our kids not only are asylum students, but we are no stranger to babies who are living very full lives and wrestling with some of the harshest realities that life has to throw at them at a very, very young age. And so sometimes it's not about a program or a service, it's just making sure that every youngster is seen, and more importantly, when they're not around, we're asking all the necessary questions and we're reaching out collectively, collaboratively.
Just to build on that, it's a great question. It's something that keeps us up at night. And just to throw some numbers at you, we had about 40% of our young people, our students, who are chronically absent. Chronically absent, that's just a label, but there's something behind that label, which is they were absent enough that the research tells us their schoolwork and their learning was going to suffer. So it's a concern. 40% is egregious. It's worrisome. But the baseline, what it used to be pre-pandemic, was about 25%. That's no good. That's unacceptable. The chancellor says we never want to let the unacceptable become acceptable. So what we want to do, and we're going to have to work with our superintendents, with our central office people to figure out how to do that. Just to build on what Dr. Blackburn is saying, is every single young person who's chronically absent, we ought to be in touch with. Every single family that has a young person who is chronically absent, we ought to be in touch with. Not to browbeat them, give them a hard time, but as Dr. Blackburn says, to make sure they feel seen and heard, and figure out what are the issues that are preventing them from coming to school. Maybe it's because the child feels like school is worthless and boring, and we got to find a better program for that child. Maybe it's because they're having some issues at home. Maybe it's because they happen to be living in a shelter. Whatever it is, we are there to help them figure out what that problem is, get them back into a place that's going to be safe, nurturing, and is going to ensure their success, which is school.
And we have about a minute left, so I'm going to ask the Chancellor if he would quickly, in 1 minute, if you could tell us what you feel the state of the city's schools is in right now.
I appreciate this. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to be here this evening, and it's a beautiful school. And again, I want to thank the leadership who have allowed us to be in their facility here today. I want to thank you so much, and thank everybody for coming out. I think that the state of the schools, I am eternally hopeful about where we are going. And we're going to begin to change the narrative on our public schools. You know, public schools and teachers and have been beat up on for so long. It's amazing that folks still get up and come to work every single day. But I'm here to say to them that as chancellor, I'm going to lift them, I'm going to celebrate them, I want to inspire them, I want to tell them how much I deeply, authentically, earnestly appreciate everything that they do every single day. Our educators. A lot of times we talk about our kids all the time, and we should, that's why we're here. But our educators, our principals, our assistant principals, our teachers, everybody that works in our schools who, as Mark said, feed our children, make sure that this building is clean. Far too many of those folks go unheard and not lifted and celebrated and acknowledged. And I want to tell each and every one of them just how much I deeply appreciate you. We are not going to change this system around without you. And if anything else, we're going to take what you're doing and we're going to highlight it and we're going to share it. And there are good things happening in every school across New York City. And if everybody was learning the great things that everybody else is doing, every school would continue to get better. And I'm committed to connecting those dots, to helping everybody to get better. I don't want to just see some schools doing well and some schools that, every school can get better if we celebrate and we lift up what everybody is doing. So I'm very hopeful about this school year. I appreciate everything that you've done to provide this forum for us, and I will leave you with this: the best is yet to come. Thank you.
And of course, we want to thank the Chancellor, the First Deputy Chancellor, the Deputy Chancellors, all of the superintendents, principals, the teachers, the parents, community members, and all of you watching on ABC7 and Y. It takes a village, and there's a reason why that statement exists, and it couldn't be more true. Sonia Rincon, my Eyewitness News, my colleague, thank you so much tonight. It's a pleasure.
And we wish everyone a happy first day of school.
Yes, yes.
Let's not make this the only event like this. We'll do lots more, and we hope to see you again. Have a great night, everybody.
We look forward to it. Thank you.